So I don't really have much for you today in terms of news, but I did actually want to cover this. It looks like the PlayStation 2 just turned 20 today, and I want to talk about my experiences, and overall I just really wanted to talk about the PlayStation 2 because I do think the PlayStation 2 is one of my favorite systems of all time. Keynote, I said one of my favorites, so it may not necessarily be my favorite, but it is definitely up there as one of my favorite consoles of all time because honestly, the PlayStation 2 is a really great system, and there is nothing wrong with the PlayStation 2. It was pretty much the successor to the original PlayStation that came out in the 90s, and like I said, there was nothing wrong with it. It wasn't even really a flawed system. It was pretty much a perfect system in my eyes. Sure, there's no system that is perfect. Maybe you don't like the game library, maybe the resolution wasn't the greatest looking back, but overall, the PlayStation 2 is just one of those systems that I'll always remember and I'll always actually look at as one of my favorite systems of all time, just because I've actually had a lot of memories with the PlayStation 2, and yeah, I love the PlayStation 2 as one of my favorites. If I was to pick one of my favorite PlayStation consoles, I personally would definitely pick the PlayStation 2 over something like the PlayStation 1. Although the PlayStation 1 still has a lot of killer games, I would definitely say the sweet spot and where Sony really got its footing would definitely be the PlayStation 2. You can see why the PlayStation 2 is also one of the best selling home consoles of all time from Sony, or just from a games company, because it did so many things for games. It made games go into the right directions. Like for instance, the PlayStation 2 was definitely the first console, I do believe, to actually allow you to play DVDs, and DVDs are a very cool form of media, and it was actually cool at the time if you actually owned a PlayStation 2 to be able to play your DVD movies alongside your games. So you can kind of see how the gaming industry was kind of moving more towards a multimedia box, which nowadays, of course, that's not really too surprising. We got things like Netflix, YouTube on our game consoles, but it was pretty revolutionary at the time to be able to play games and to be able to play DVDs. I know there were probably people out there, I'm pretty sure, that did buy this for a dedicated DVD player and just have the convenience of being able to actually play games on this actual console. But yes, I loved everything about the PlayStation 2. So I did own a PlayStation 1 back in the day, and then the reason I actually got the PlayStation 2 was because of a game called Crash Bandicoot. I saw Crash Bandicoot actually in a magazine, and I remember pestering my parents to actually buy a PlayStation 2 to buy the next Crash Bandicoot game, and that's actually why I did actually own a PlayStation 2. Granted, after I got my PlayStation 2, I can safely say that that game was just an okay game from Crash Bandicoot. It wasn't like a mind-blowing game or even better than some of the older ones, but just the fact that I got it for that game specifically was pretty special. And then another thing about the PlayStation 2 is I did own this one right here, the one that you're seeing on screen. I actually owned the original fat version, and then after a while, just like a lot of other people, one of the biggest downsides to the PlayStation 2 definitely had to be the disk drive. The disk drive did go out on me, just like some other people. Apparently, it was a very common problem where eventually your disk drive would just break because they weren't the best quality out there, and I know a lot of people use these for like DVD players and for games, so these things did get a lot of use from a lot of people because no longer did you have to have a separate box hooked up to play DVDs. And at the time of the PlayStation 2 actually being relevant, of course, there was no streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, so you did have to buy most media, and a lot of people were still buying DVD players or DVD discs to actually watch movies on their TV. But yeah, my disc drive finally broke on my PS2, and then after my disc drive finally broke, I actually just decided to sell it off. I actually gave my PS2 to a neighbor down the street. Funny enough, I never told him the disc drive was busted, but yes, the disc drive was busted. And then after that, I did actually get the PS2 Slim, and actually I love the PS2 Slim just because it is super small. It might be one of the smallest systems of all time, and I love the fact that that thing can still play DVDs again, and then that thing can play games as well, and it's just a very cool thing. I wish actually I wouldn't have sold my PS2 Slim, but it's never too late to buy another one, right? But yeah, and then on top of that, the PlayStation 2 was actually one of those consoles that I owned the most games for on any console ever. I think I owned over like 300 games. I owned a lot of games for this system, and I actually love this system. The only downside to this system definitely still has to be the fact that you can see on this picture right here, you can see that there is memory card slots. So if you want to save your progress in a game and come back to the area you left off in a game, you still have to use memory cards. And it's actually funny, a lot of you guys may have never experienced a time where it was kind of a pain in the ass to have to worry about saves for a game because they didn't have any built-in storage into the actual game system itself. And then of course, one thing that did make the PlayStation 2 such a special system, besides it being able to play DVD discs, was actually the fact that this was one of the first home consoles. I wouldn't say the first, because I think there was like the Dreamcast that did this, but this was one of the first consoles out there that got a lot of gamers excited because finally you can play games online. Yes, you can actually play games online. Granted, I don't know how many people actually played games online with the PS2, and when it comes to my PS2 experience, all I can say is I never played games online because I never had a fast enough internet. My first ever exposure to online gaming was definitely during the Xbox 360 days with a little game called Halo. If you know what Halo is, of course you all know what Halo is, but yes, Halo was the very first game I actually ever played online before. Actually, I did play Halo 1 online on the PC actually, so technically my first ever exposure to online gaming was not the Xbox 360, but I can't really remember those experiences since they were so long ago, so I just say 360. But yes, I loved everything about the PlayStation 2. I also love the fact that the PlayStation 2 is also one of the first consoles. I don't know if it was the first console, but definitely one of the first consoles out there to actually do backwards compatibility with older hardware like the PlayStation 1. And fun fact, I actually used the backwards compatibility a long time ago when I actually had this because I was upgrading from the PlayStation 1, and it did make sense for me to just play all my games on one system. Why would I want to have to worry about hooking up my other console, having to actually put the discs in and things like that? Just having one system that practically did it all. And yeah, I did a lot of backwards compatibility with this system with the older games. And one thing I really did love about the PS2 era in particular was the fact that there were a lot of different companies that still actually cared about 3D platformers. And back in the day, I was really invested in platformers because I grew up with platformers. And then the next step to traditional platformers, of course, like Spyro and Crash, would actually still be 3D platformers. So I played a lot of 3D platformers on the PS2. I played games like the Sly Cooper games, if you ever played the Sly Cooper games. And then I also played Jak and Daxter, which, if you don't know anything about Jak and Daxter is actually a game that's actually very the same as Crash Bandicoot. It's actually made from the same developers as Crash Bandicoot, Naughty Dog. Of course, you guys know Naughty Dog today to make games like Uncharted and the Last of Us series. But yes, overall, my memories with this system were flat out fantastic. And honestly, I still wish I owned a PS2 today because the PS2 is still one of my favorite consoles of all time. I love the boot animation for this system. I actually really do love the games library. It might be one of my favorite games library to date. And alongside that, the PlayStation 2 is just one of those consoles that has a big games library as well. I do know for a fact the PS2 does have over 1,000 games if you wanted to buy games for this system, and that is a lot. And this system is also known for one type of genre. It's really known for a lot of RPGs because there is a lot of good RPGs back on the PS2. Also, talking about games and talking about the PS2 was definitely one of my first systems ever that I actually got peripherals for my system. Like for instance, I think the PS2 era was when Guitar Hero was released, so I actually got Guitar Hero around the time it released. Granted, I think I got actually Guitar Hero 2, so I played Guitar Hero 2 just like everybody else. You had to have the plastic instruments because the plastic instruments were flat out amazing, and I loved playing Guitar Hero 2, and then I pretty much bought all the other Guitar Heroes and then Rock Band series after that. It just really did hook me. And then I think own SingStar on this thing, where you had like a USB microphone that you could actually plug into the system and then actually sing on your system. So that was cool. This was the first time I actually got peripherals outside of just regular game controllers for the system. But yes, I had a lot of memories with my PlayStation 2, and I actually liked the jump from the PS1 era all the way up to the PS2 era. It really did feel like the PS2 era was definitely the era where 3D games were actually becoming good. We had some 3D games back on the PS1 with things like Spyro and just some other games, but in general those were kind of because a lot of those games didn't support things like true stick controls and things like that, and it was still an area where graphics weren't all the greatest too, so seeing the worlds in 3D was kind of but then PS2 really stepped up the game, and PS2 was also my very first system where I actually got a lot of exposure actually playing the Grand Theft Auto games. I got Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and then I also got Grand Theft Auto 3. I was actually mad a long time ago when I got Grand Theft Auto 3 because as I got Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City was already out, and then San Andreas was already out, and I was mad that all my friends were playing like the newest one, San Andreas, and I was still playing Grand Theft Auto 3, and I was just very disappointed. But yes, like I said, I've had a lot of memories with the PS2. I love the fact that it's pretty much a multimedia device, and then you can see the direction that Sony wanted to take the gaming industry. They wanted to make one box that can pretty much have multiple purposes instead of just playing games. But yes, overall, a very cool system from Sony, and I'm sure a lot of people remember the PS2 because it was a pretty good system with a lot of amazing games. Like I said, over 1,000 games, and it's interesting that how time flies, that now the PlayStation 2 turns 20 years old, and yeah, so many memories, and overall just one of the best consoles of all time in my eyes and in a lot of people's eyes. Well, that's pretty much going to do it for this video. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne.